Are we ready? Oh, okay. Welcome to the 2024 Candidates Forum, sponsored by Wallingford Community Women in conjunction with Wallingford Government Media. I'm Jean McFarland, the program moderator. We are trying a new format this year where all candidates were given a preview of the questions 2 days ago. All candidates by district will be asked a question and will have 2 minutes to respond. They will then have 1 minute to make additional comment. We will then move to the next district with the same question. After all candidates have answered the first question, we will move on to the next question. There will be a total of 5 questions. Once all the questions have been asked and responded to, the candidates will have the opportunity to make a closing 2-minute statement. Liz Linehan, Democrat for the 103rd State District, is unable to attend, so I will read a brief statement from her after the closing remarks. Before beginning the questioning, I'd like to introduce the candidates. They are Rebecca Highland, Democrat, 90th State Representative District. Craig Fishbein, Republican, 90th State Representative District. Mary Mashinsky, Democrat, 85th State Representative District. Jerry Farrell Jr., Republican, 85th State Representative District. Brandi Mandato, Democrat, 34th State Senate District. Paul Cicarella, Republican, 34th State Senate District. And David Bedell, Green Party, 34th State Senate District. Ms. Highland, I will ask you the first question. Crime is a concern in most communities. While FBI statistics say that all crime is down in the last 2 years, the perception of the general population is there are more car break-ins and theft, street highway takeovers, and personal safety threats at stores and gas stations, and random acts of violence evolving from our youth than in the 10 years prior to COVID. If you have a one-on-one conversation with police personnel, they feel that they are fighting a losing battle, as there are no consequences, especially for repeat offenders. Understanding that you can't legislate parental supervision, how do you propose to address this ongoing issue to make our communities safer?
Thank you, and thank you to everybody for hosting tonight's forum. Crime is a very difficult issue because it's very real. And you can't look at somebody or talk to somebody who's been the victim of a crime and dispute the very real emotions and the very real consequences, nor should we ever dispute those very real consequences and emotions associated with being the victim of a crime. Part of the reason that I appreciate this question so much is because it illustrates the fact that there is a divide between perception and perhaps reality when it comes to crime statistics. The facts of the matter are that crime has been decreasing, and that's been in both Connecticut, but also nationwide. And as a legislator, we have to be responsible to evidence, and we have to be responsible to facts, and we have to make policy decisions based on what's true and real. And so what we need to do is first look at what's been working and continue that. We also need to focus very heavily on ensuring that our police are supported and that our police feel like they're getting the support from legislators that they need to keep doing what is a tremendously thankless job a lot of the time. And it's incumbent upon us as legislators to do that. We also have to look at proactive solutions because, quite frankly, what's better than if we can come up with solutions that prevent people from being crime victims in the first place and also prevent crime from happening. That saves us money on both ends. So we need to be looking at proactive solutions to preventing crime from happening in the first place. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Craig Fishbein?
Thank you. So the perception is reality. Obviously, if you look at the numbers, the actual numbers, for motor vehicle theft in Connecticut, 2019, there were 6,000 cars stolen. 2020, 8.5 thousand. 2021, 7.5 thousand. In 2022, 7,000. In 2023, 10,000 vehicles were stolen in the state of Connecticut. It was a 33% increase. We were the third highest increase in the whole country. So to say, yes, crime, other crimes are decreasing, motor vehicle theft not significantly increasing. Up until last year, creating a street takeover was not a crime in Connecticut. Senator Cicarella and I worked together to the Public Safety Committee to actually get that to be a crime now. We're proactively dealing with these things. Something also that could be looked at is curfews. Some of our cities actually have curfews, but unfortunately the crimes are being taken in other places. So I'm out of time. Thank you.
Rebecca, do you have a further comment?
Yes, so statistics are great in a vacuum. And that's what we're getting right now, is we're getting numbers in a vacuum with no context or comparison to what they actually mean. And let me just say, I have been the victim of crime. I have been the victim of an attempted carjacking by 3 gentlemen who were armed and high on drugs. But for the grace of God, it happened to have occurred in front of a firefighter's house who called 911, and the police arrived in time to stop something that could have been far worse. I've also been burglarized. None of those things happened in Wallingford, but I understand that crime is very real to the people who are affected by it. And on the one hand, we have to ask our politicians to stop using crime as a red herring just to gain votes, and instead acknowledge that there are very real things that are working. Thank you.
Craig, do you have further comment?
Just on the curfew issue, a lot of people don't know, but like Bridgeport has a curfew. They put it into place many years ago. Somebody under the age of 18 is not supposed to be out after 11 o'clock at night. Amazingly, Bridgeport of all places, they make the penalty, the parents actually pay the penalty. But the problem is that the crimes are occurring. You have children, in most cases, from Bridgeport, from the cities that are going into the more rural areas and creating the crimes. You can't enforce an ordinance, a town ordinance of Bridgeport in Woodbridge, for instance. Can't do that. But the state, and this is something actually New Haven is looked at, if the state passed something like this, then it could be more far-reaching. And, you know, certainly we just had, 4 children, a serious accident. 2 of them died last night. They were out at 1:20 in the morning. Not good. So, thank you.
Mary Mashinsky, would you like me to repeat the question, or you're all set? Okay.
There we go. We have, compared to 1991, when there were 26,000 cars stolen in Connecticut, we have been getting better. We're down this year, it looks like 8,000 so far, which is not good, but it's a big improvement over years past. The old, in the 90s, they used to steal them to take them to chop shops. They'd break up the cars and sell them for parts. And more recently, they were selling the catalytic converters. We did do bipartisan legislation to stop the market for the catalytic converters, and it has really dropped off. What the kids do now is they steal the cars and they go riding in them and use them to commit other crimes. And like my colleague from Wallingford, I also was victim of one of these jump in your car situations that happened at Walmart when I brought my groceries out to the car. They did jump in my car, but it was not an armed person. And so I got off lightly. The reality is we did we did change the law 3 years ago so that repeat offenders and juveniles are shown to the judge, and they can go directly to juvenile detention if the form is given to the judge. The solutions for these young kids doing this joyriding crimes are, some of them are in the Dalio report, to invest in these kids with mentoring and to help pay for their career education so they actually have another way to go besides stealing things. If we lock them all up, it's $500,000 per kid. For $6,000, you could mentor a kid and change their behavior. It's just more cost effective to do it that way. And the other thing I'm working on with my colleague, Representative Fishbein, we're trying to get Star Chase for town of Wallingford. It's a dart that you shoot at the car,
Mary?
and it allows you to track the car.
Jerry Farrell.
Thank you to the club for sponsoring this. You know, I think in regard to this question, we have to be a little careful that all teenagers are not bad. I am the father to 2 teenagers. My son's a junior at Lyman Hall. My daughter graduated Lyman Hall in June and is off at college. You know, there's no question that the children of Wallingford, the teenagers of Wallingford, benefit from all of the great things that go on in the schools, at the rec department. You know, there are so many things that a teenager in Wallingford can take advantage of and keep busy with. You know, the problem is that we have teenagers who come from out of town and are committing all of these crimes. I guess I'll add myself to the list that they didn't break into my car, but they were in my driveway at 2 a.m. And thanks to the Wallingford police got right there, and that was the end of it. But I do think there's a couple of solutions here that, you know, regrettably our juvenile justice system is not working for us, that kids are coming and committing these crimes. So one of the things I would propose would be to lower
Jerry?
the age to be tried as an adult. Thank you.
Okay. Mary, do you have a further comment?
Just to reiterate that we did change the law for the repeat offenders. In fact, if this is the 3rd car they've stolen, they can get a 20-year sentence now.
Okay. Jerry?
You know, another thing that we need to change is that we need to give our police back qualified immunity. That, you know, it's regrettable that police officers have to go out every day knowing that they could be sued civilly, that they could lose their house. I know this personally during the time I was a state official and I closed down a bar where the police had been 50 times. They had the nerve to sue me as an individual in my personal capacity. So I think that law enforcement, you know, it's regrettable that the people in Hartford feel that our police officers should not have qualified immunity. So I would change that.
Okay. Brandi Mandato?
Thank you. I think, based on my understanding of the candidates on this panel, that I am the person who has served either in a carceral facility or working directly with law enforcement the longest. So I will acknowledge that I think many components from this question come directly from candidate Cicarella's op-ed that was largely panned as having lots of misinformation and very little solutions. So I work every day with law enforcement and survivors of crime to craft real solutions at the state level all over the country to increase public safety and decrease crime. When you talk to those folks about the kind of approach to public safety that we're hearing tonight and that we have seen over and over again, represented by folks on this panel in Hartford, this is not tough on crime, this is stupid on crime. This does not make us safer. This does not result in policy that protects us or creates safer communities. I work, am I out?
No, you got one
Great.
more.
So I will add that we know what works in terms of diversion and in terms of stopping children from engaging in criminal activity. There's tons of research on it. We are actively in the state of Connecticut. There's a coalition of leaders, Republicans, Democrats, et cetera, coming together to implement that youth development intervention. That's what reduces crime, not punishing children at younger ages, but actually providing them opportunity and connectivity. It's research-based, it's supported by law enforcement, and it's being implemented all over the country because we know it works. Thank you.
Paul Cicarella?
Thank you. And we heard statistics, and we realize statistics sometimes can be pliable. But what I gauge my response on and how I come up with solutions is based upon what I'm hearing from my constituents. And there's a bunch of individuals just up here in this small group that have been a victim of a crime. And we really need to stop politicizing crime. We need to listen to our constituents. I'm not making up that people feel threatened in our community. I'm getting these phone calls constantly. And, we just heard about some laws that were put in place that would address repeat offenders, juvenile repeat offenders, and not only to hold them accountable, but make sure they're able to be utilizing the resources and programs that we do have in place. And that law was a great law. And the Judiciary Committee changed a rule in their practice book. That rule allows them to be available for a risk screener. And that was designated and designed for misdemeanors and small crimes. And it keeps them out of the judicial system, and they go to a juvenile review board. We see individuals that are stealing vehicles and getting referred to a juvenile review board, but juvenile review boards do not handle grand theft auto. And they are given a referral to a counselor, and they get no guidance. I've talked to juvenile probation officers that say they have juvenile clients that have committed 7 car thefts and have not been subject to some of the resources that we have. So we did pass a law, but with a regulation, it changed the outcome. And we're not helping these children, I agree. They need to realize there's other paths. And we put forward legislation, and the Republican colleagues on my side of the aisle talked about them, and it's workforce development, it's a pipeline, it's truancy. Those are the issues that we need to address to make sure these kids aren't committing these crimes.
David Bedell?
Yes, I think that it's true that some categories of crime have increased in recent years. Years ago, I don't remember ever hearing about street takeovers. I think that's something new, and it's a very dangerous activity, which is only added on top of the ordinary reckless driving that's causing all the surge in traffic accidents. For the most part, these are not career criminals. These are young thrill seekers, sometimes egged on by gang membership. And I don't think it's a productive solution to incarcerate them, young people. I think a more appropriate punishment might be sentencing to community service. Make them do some useful work where they might learn a skill or an activity that will serve them later in life. Make them go work on a horse farm or help younger kids to learn a sport. If they know how to hotwire a car or build a custom engine, I don't know, maybe they could help out at the Wallingford Street Rod Association or another car club. Make them do something useful. And I think that you have to get activities for young people that draws them away from these thrills and gangs. Lead them into extreme sports, if that's what they're into, thrills. Let them go learn bungee jumping and mountain climbing. It may satisfy the same inner desires that they have, but will not lead to illegal activities, and they could be part of a community and be helping younger children to do this as well.
Brandi, do you have further comment?
I agree that we can pass a lot of good policy at the state level, but if we don't appropriately implement it and fund it, it falls apart. So if we're not training staff that are working with young people, this isn't going to be effective. If we don't staff caseloads appropriately, this work isn't going to be effective. I will also say that if you care about violent crime, then you don't vote no on the most comprehensive violent crime prevention bill in the last decade, which candidate Cicarella did.
Paul Cicarella, do you have another comment?
I do. And unfortunately, what we're seeing here is the dirty side of politics, manipulating facts and distorting them for a narrative that's just simply not true. To say that I do not support law enforcement is laughable, and I won't even begin to explain that. I base my actions on what my constituents are talking to me about. My opponent has chosen to try to attack my record with her version of a reality that is simply not true, and she did the same to me personally. And the fact is, I've done nothing wrong. I've lived my life with honesty, integrity, the same way I was raised, the same way I raised my children. And even the state stated I'd done nothing wrong. We need to make this about the issues that are affecting our constituents, not personal attacks. We're gonna get nowhere. We need to be able to meet in the middle, come up with solutions, and address them. I hope we really utilize this time, the rest of the debate, to talk about the things that my constituents are talking about. Thank you.
David Bedell.
Yeah, I'll just add that what we need is more legal activities to draw in young people. And whether that's publicly funded sports programs through the schools or other entities, or whether it's assigning them to supervised community service with nonprofit organizations. I think this is the kind of thing that would draw these young offenders away from a life of crime. We do not want to send them to prison where they're just going to learn criminal techniques and come out as repeating hardened criminals.
Thank you. The next question. Many candidates talk about the need to support small business as they are critical to job creation in our communities. What changes do you think are necessary at a state level to support small business? And this question, we will start with Craig.
Thank you. I think the best way to support small business is for government to try and get out of the way as much as it can. Licensure is an area that could be addressed. We, various years, I think for the last 4 years, have sought some sort of study by the state of Connecticut as to licenses that is merely a fee-raising situation. A fee is taken, just so that you know, just because somebody has a license, it's not a protection from the government that they're going to do their job properly. Now, I was looking at our statutes today, music therapy. You need a license to perform music therapy. And if you represent to anybody in the state of Connecticut that you are a music therapist without having a music therapist license, it is a Class D felony in this state, which means that you can serve up to 5 years for making that representation. Now, why is that? Does that make sense? The other thing is with licensure, we should make licenses open to residents of other states. We're going to talk about healthcare and those kinds of things, and we have it here with the electric division. Electric division has difficulty bringing in linesmen from other states because their license isn't portable. We should be working in Hartford to make those licenses portable. But all too often what you have is you have protectionists. So you have people, lobbyists in Hartford who say, no, we don't want competition. We don't want more workers. We want to protect our workers, and therefore they oppose this. We ran into this directly head on with court reporters a few years ago, where they were pushing actually for the licenses, and the licenses were going to be available to out-of-state residents. And they were against that, and I'm sure it'll come back, but thank you.
Rebecca Highland.
Thank you. So, let's be very honest here. The government is not going away. The solution is to make the government work for us and not despite us. And there are so many things proactively that we can be doing to help small business. Small businesses are one of the biggest providers of jobs to the private workforce in this state, and they provide such a pipeline for specialty training and for working in all kinds of different areas and job types. We can be looking at not only financial assistance so that small businesses have the capital so that they can start their companies and get moving. This can come in the form of grants, which your state representative should and can be part of helping businesses acquire. This can come in the form of low-interest loans, of tax incentives. We also need to be looking at the ways the government can help increase the market share so that small businesses aren't being pushed out of specialty markets by the big box companies that basically put small businesses out of business. We can be looking at decreasing regulations and bureaucracy that get in the way of small business success. I was speaking with an electrician who does probably a lot of the electrical work for many of us here in Wallingford, and he was telling me that he has an apprenticeship program, but there's only one person per region that can get his apprentices the licenses they need to work, and so it's taking too long to get his people on the job. That's something the government can help with. We can also get money back to the consumers so that the consumers can afford to pay for goods at small businesses instead of being forced to have to shop at big business, big box stores. We can look at development, research and development, and technological incentives so that more companies are That's my time.
Okay. Craig, do you have further comment?
Yeah, I just want to point out the rules are 2 and then 1, but I'm certainly open to the discussion. So, another area, we hear a lot about grants and things like that. Somebody's got to pay for grants. These things aren't free. So when you create a grant program, you're actually raising taxes. But something that I think Representative Mashinsky and I have been proponents of is the manufacturing apprentice programs. Manufacturing needs more people in that space. Right here in Wallingford, we need more people in that space. And we should be looking at the ratio of apprentices to actually licensed individuals to perhaps increase the amount of apprentices that one can work with an electrician so they get that skill. It doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't cost us any tax dollars. You're getting somebody else with skills into the workforce, and that just helps the economy because manufacturing is really hurting, and you're going to see a dramatic impact in the next 5 years. So thank you.
Rebecca, do you have further comment?
So lastly, the money for grants is in Hartford. You've paid your taxes. You've paid for it. And in fact, that's why Representative Mashinsky has actually been so successful at bringing a number of grants back to Wallingford that help Wallingford as a whole and the people of the 90th District, whose current representative has not brought those grants back. Secondly, when we're talking about workforce development, we need to look to the experts. We need to look to the specialists in the area. And that's why I am proud to say that I have been endorsed by the Connecticut State Building Trades, by the Carpenters Local 326, by the Operators Engineers Local 478, as well as a whole host of other small business and state unions that represent workers. And it's important that we have access to the experts and we listen to them when they tell us what we need to do to support small business and support our workers.
Okay. Jerry Farrell?
Thank you. It's unfortunate that when legislators are running for office, they talk a good game on some of these issues, but once they're in Hartford, they turn a deaf ear. We were referencing all of the small fees that many small businesses encounter. I was the Commissioner of Consumer Protection. I was obligated to collect many of those fees on behalf of the legislature. I went to the legislature and said, many of these make absolutely no sense. If you have a fee that, the business gets something out of, that there's an inspection or, some government action results, that's fine. But with so many of these fees, it's a money grab. Government does nothing in return. I will give you one example of one of the most useless fees that are out there. The label fee for liquor, beer, and wine, that if you want to sell liquor, beer, or wine, you have to pay a $200 fee to the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut does no inspection, is obligated to do no inspection on that. I think some of these things need to be eliminated. It would make Connecticut more affordable, that if businesses didn't have to pay the fees, they wouldn't pass them on to consumers. So the next time you go and buy a bottle of wine or beer or spirits, remember there's a label fee of $200 that's being figured into the price. I would eliminate many of those fees. I tried to when I was in Hartford, and the legislature turned a deaf ear.
Mary Mashinsky.
The the United States Small Business Development Program gives out loans to start out a new business, anywhere from $5,000 to up to $500,000 if you have a business smaller than 100 staff. And you can have enough time to pay it back, 60 months or even longer for the larger ones. I've had some small businesses who asked for help with a loan to redo their restaurant, and some of them had bad credit. They couldn't qualify for the regular small business loans, but they could qualify in some cases for the micro loans, which are aimed at people who did have bad credit in their past, but now they're starting over again. The Department of Economic and Community Development also will help with a business plan, a realistic business plan, to make sure that the entrepreneur is getting into, knows what they're getting into. Another expense for businesses, which we try to fix, is health insurance for their employees. If they can offer health insurance, it makes them an employer that people want to work for. We have a lower participation rate in that than small business in Massachusetts. I'm trying to find out why that is, and I have a research question in legislative research to see if we can figure out what is Massachusetts offering that makes it more interesting to their small businesses. We do have programs for women entrepreneurs who can get help starting their business. And another tool that some towns are using is a group investment for a business downtown. For example, the entire downtown is served by shared internet or energy production,
Mary,
utilities.
your overtime.
Thank you.
Jerry, do you have further comment?
Sure. You know, one of the best grant programs that's out there in Wallingford is called the VIP program, that it enables a lot of our manufacturing businesses to buy additional business equipment. I toured component engineers in the last couple of months. Every time they get one of those grants, they're able to buy a new piece of business machinery and employ an additional Wallingford person. So a lot of these things deserve, you know, more attention, more information to businesses and townsfolk so that these things exist and can be pursued.
Okay, Brandi Mandato.
I don't think I'm supposed to go first.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Paul Cicarella.
Thank you. Thank you. So, you know, I think it was Forbes magazine that said we're second to last in business-friendly states. Second to last. We see our large companies leaving. We saw GE leave, and one of the main reasons was the regulations. We are over-regulated. We need to find a way to reduce the cost of doing business, not only for big business, but our small business. A lot of our small businesses do not have the resources to up and move like GE. We need to find a simple solution, which was proposed this year. Senator Ryan Fazio and myself and many other colleagues supported reducing the license fees. We see the fees of doing business in the state of Connecticut is drastically more than our surrounding states. That's one small thing we can do. Now, this statistics and study that came out of Forbes magazine didn't take into consideration the bills that were proposed in our labor committee this year. A majority of these bills are anti-small business. They are suffering. If you go walk around and you talk to these businesses, they're going to say the biggest challenge is not only trying to find people to come and work, but be able to keep the doors open. When we charge them more money to do business, at the end of the day, they have to charge the consumer more money. So we simply have to be friendlier to small business. There was a piece of legislation proposed specifically to restaurants. Not only did the owners of the business not want it, not only did the employees not want it, the patrons didn't want it. It was the one fair wage. It was a tip credit where everybody would get paid the same amount instead of getting their tips. No one wanted it. It would be bad for the business and everyone else involved, but the majority party still pushed that legislation. We have to do our job, and that's listen to our constituents.
David Bedell.
Yeah, while I think there are permits and fees that could be done away with, a lot of these permits and licenses are necessary. We don't want childcare workers or food service businesses serving the public with untrained staff. We need people we need to be sure that they are trained for their job. And I've talked with business people who complain about the process, the red tape, the applications, and the delays. I think a lot of the problem is not that there is an application and a permit has to be obtained, but that there's a delay in the response. So they wait, and the state comes back saying, okay, you passed that step, now you have to revise it. Or, okay, then there's another delay. And, okay, you passed that step, but now here's another permit you have to pass, you have to apply for. And there's a backlog of these applications due to understaffed offices in Hartford. So we need to speed up that process so that business people can launch their business. Another obstacle, as Mary said, is the cost of health care. To me, it's illogical that health care should be tied to employment. We have a lot of potential entrepreneurs out there who are afraid to launch a new business because not only don't they know how to pay for employees' health care, they don't know how to pay for their own health care. So they stick with a job because they need the health insurance, and their skills are being underutilized. So what we really need is a statewide health program, healthcare insurance. Short of that, maybe allow small businesses to buy into the state employee medical insurance program. Thank you.
Brandi Mandato.
Thank you. I worked earlier this year with the U.S. Department of Small Business Administration to update their rules to make business loans to small businesses more accessible to nationally, but also to people in Connecticut. The reporting, the most up-to-date reporting from Forbes says that Connecticut ranks 30 out of 50, which is not good. We can do better. And so there's a full business ecosystem that they include in that research. And there are areas that we do well in. We are really good at helping businesses get started. We're good at providing training and grants and support. And where we really have some obvious shortcomings are around talent. So being able to attract and maintain talent. Think about things like an infrastructure that supports housing and transportation. And then also the cost of doing businesses in Connecticut is incredibly high. And so we have to evaluate the way that we are taxing and requiring fees from small businesses. When we look at large corporations, we see large corporations benefiting from the public system at a very different scale. We see them leveraging our public education system and our housing infrastructure in ways that small businesses don't. My sister is a small business owner. My cousin who's here tonight is starting her first small business. There is real opportunity for growth and development. We have to invest in it. I will also say that I work as part of my day job with chambers of commerce, both at the local and state level and nationally. So working with them to understand how we could provide enterprise level support, tools, and intervention that benefits small businesses that don't have the ability to bring on full-time roles or to bring on a particular tool that if we did that through the chamber, decreases costs. We also need to evaluate our procurement policies as a state so that we are prioritizing contracts with small and medium-sized local businesses.
Thank you. Paul, do you have further comment?
Yes, thank you. So having conversations not only with business owners, but also the associations that represent these businesses. They are the voice for these small businesses. I happen to be endorsed by 2 of them, and what we hear is the regulations that are burdensome. Some of the policies that are coming out, I think it may have been Representative Fishbein that says we kind of need to get out of their way, right? We need to let the businesses do what they need to do while still making sure that the end user is safe and everybody knows what they're doing. But we again see coming out of the Labor Committee bills like predictive scheduling. Certain small businesses simply can't do predictive scheduling. And if we try to put those regulations on these businesses, they simply won't stay in business. And we see other states that do not have these type of policies. And we're kind of doubling down.
Thank you. David Bedell, do you have further comment?
You know, besides removing some of the obstacles for small businesses, we could provide incentives. You mentioned apprenticeship programs, vocational programs in high schools for kids who are not on track for higher education. We need basic business education and financial education for high schools so that young people can know what they're doing if they want to start a new business. They'll learn something about accounting and business planning. Anything that would help people to go into this field of small businesses, which our economy depends on.
Thank you. Brandi, do you have further comment?
Sure, just on predictive scheduling. So predictive scheduling doesn't dictate when a business can operate or how it can operate. It does ensure that workers can plan childcare, can decide if they can be with their families, have the opportunity to take a parent to the doctor. So yeah, we're gonna move forward with worker-facing policies, and we can do that at the same time that we uplift business. I know, because I've been doing it my whole career.
Okay, the next question. There has been an increase in vehicular accidents on our highways due to speed and wrong-way driving, as well as local street accidents causing injury to passengers and to pedestrians, bicyclists. What changes do you consider necessary to reduce the severity of accidents in our state? Rebecca Highland, please.
Thank you. So we need to look at solving this problem both as quickly as possible, but in a way that's also allowing for long-term solutions. Obviously, we need to make our roads safer, and I think we all feel it, we've all sensed it when we're out on the highway and passed by somebody while laying on their horn. First, we have to help our police with their severe staffing shortage. The state troopers are so painfully understaffed that there are reports of troopers working 80, 90, 100-hour plus work weeks. So we are asking these people to make split-second decisions, life and death situations, when they are beyond fatigued and not at all in the mental space or physical space to have that carry that responsibility on them. We also need to look at technology, warning systems. There are systems that we can research and investigate that would allow for warnings to be sent to the police when there's a wrong way driver on the highway. So the police are getting the call perhaps before anybody else has hopefully seen it and or hopefully has not yet been injured by it. So short term. And then we have to look at long-term solutions. There's been a lot of studies done at the national level as to why traffic fatalities and serious traffic accidents have been going up so steeply in the last few years. One of the reasons is mental health issues that have to do with road rage. We all lived in a bubble for a few years. We all got a little bit stir crazy, and unfortunately the reports of road rage-based accidents have skyrocketed in the last couple of years. So we have to do something to address that.
Thank you. Excuse me. Craig, sorry.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to say that no child should ever go to jail. you know, when I look at the numbers, unfortunately, I think you guys all see it. When you open up the newspaper, I was talking about the incident in Groton last night. There's an incident in Durham not too long ago. Kids joyriding, creating havoc, dying in car accidents. That's a majority of what you see going on presently. I heard earlier that we should, you know, with youngsters, we should be trying to get them into programs. I agree. But what do you do with the child who says, I'm not going to do that? I'm not interested in that program. I want to hang out with my friends and have fun and steal another car. What do you do with that child? At some point, you have to do something. Helping the police. Do you know that right now, if a police officer was sitting at, let's say, BJ's, you know, BJ's last year, they had an incident where people were walking out of the store with large, big screen TVs. They were shoplifting. There was a police officer sitting in front of the store. They could not pursue the vehicle under our current law that had all of those TVs in it. We have to stop that. As people are speeding away from these sites, and granted, there are concerns about police officers and pursuit. But when you handcuff the police, as we have in this state, you only see increased death. That, in conjunction with the legalization of marijuana, I still say, is it a coincidence? Connecticut thinks that they legalized marijuana and we have all these deaths on our roadways? My time is up. Thank you.
Rebecca, do you have further comment?
Yes, so I just want to finish up on the question that was asked to us about the accidents. In terms of long-term solutions, we also have to address our increased substance abuse issue that has really spiked after COVID for obvious reasons. And we really need to invest in education programs for distracted driving. I will say that when I was a teacher, one of the things that the kids used to tell me was how uncool it is to drink and drive, because the education programs on not drinking and driving had worked, and they had worked really well, and kids understood that that was not a good solution and not something that they could be doing. And what we need to do is we need to make sure we're using evidence-based solutions, not anecdotal solutions, things that have been proven to work, so that our police, our first responders, our kids, and our people who are suffering from substance abuse issues and road rage issues get the help that they need. Thank you.
Craig?
Yeah, just briefly, you know, coming back to the accident situation and the police, as Representative Mashinsky talked about earlier, I think the whole Wallingford delegation signed on the Schott situation. Star Chase. You know, basically Star Chase, the officer is able to shoot an implement onto the back of the vehicle, and then they don't have to chase the vehicle. Through satellite technology, it tells where the vehicle goes, and that would be an effective thing. We've got buy-in from the chief of police here in Wallingford, and we are actively looking to have that technology paid for as a joint effort. You know, I think we proposed that the town pay for half and the state pay for half, so that there's some buy-in. But that's something also. You know, these police officers need to have the tools that they need to have to keep our roadways safe. So, thank you.
Mary?
There are, you probably noticed it when you're driving, there are now screens on the highway that actually show you how many people have died on the roads this year, and it keeps changing. And it keeps going up, 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 which I think bothers everybody up here, that it keeps increasing. So it's now often 300 a year dying on our roads. What I found out from Yukon is that the majority of the deaths are on state and local roads. I had thought it was the highways, but it isn't. It's the state and local roads, because they're really narrow and not made for fast drivers on what was a country road. They don't have sidewalks and so on. The state police are, even though there are not as many as we would like to hire, and we are hiring them, they've made 35,000 stops for speeding and travel violations in a year, which is good. We still have impaired drivers. I agree with Representative Fishbein that drug use and alcohol use are impairments that we should be discouraging, not allowing. And I'm hopeful that technology will allow the car to know when a driver is impaired and not start. And then the person would have to wait until they sober up before their car will even go. I hope that will be universal technology. The wrong way drivers is another problem, and we do have money from the feds plus 20% from our state, and we are putting in technology to keep people from going up the wrong way and colliding with another motorist. One of our own colleagues at the legislature was killed that way a couple of years back. We are using cameras at work zones on the highway that will catch people speeding in a work zone. That's obviously important because people die if they're struck by a motorist. And red light cameras, local option.
Thank you. Jerry Farrell.
I think that some of the things that the state has done, particularly with wrong way driving, if you're getting on a highway, you do see a lot of the technology that's being implemented, and that's great. But I do think there are some more practical things that have to be brought to bear. You know, unfortunately, one of the key issues in accidents and all of these things is the speed at which people drive. People drive way too fast. They do not seem to be in fear of our state traffic laws. Now, those laws can be amended when an officer pulls you over. You know, it somewhat depends on the speed that you're going. If you're going over 85, perhaps, they could charge you with reckless, which is a crime as opposed to a traffic infraction. You know, regrettably, I think we have to look at whether or not, you know, the reckless speed needs to be moved to a lower speed, perhaps from 85 to 75, that we can't keep having, you know, carnage on our highways and streets. And unfortunately, we're all responsible for that because we're all speeding too fast. And I think, you know, if the laws were amended, that people would start changing their behavior. And that's ultimately what we need.
Okay, Mary, do you have further comment?
Well, just another plug for Star Chase. If we can get this money for Star Chase, and it is used in New Haven, and it is used in Massachusetts by the state troopers, you can tag a car with young criminals in it, or a car that is done a traffic violation, changed lanes improperly, or cut off somebody, whatever, and you can gradually pull them over without risk to the other drivers or the pedestrians. So we are hoping if we keep working on this, we will get it passed, and it'll be a new tool for our police.
Jerry?
You know, a lot of these things are great things, but you go back to the basic fact that, you know, the legislature has taken away so many powers from the police. I talked about qualified immunity before. There's a whole list of things that, you know, the police do not have in, you know, their bailiwick of being able to deal with criminals, whether they're career criminals, whether they're people who are speeding on the highway. You know, we can talk about all these newfangled technologies, and they're wonderful, but they don't change the fact that, you know, unfortunately, the majority party in Hartford took away all these things that the police do need. So I would work hard to put some of those things back.
Okay, David Bedell?
Yeah, the speeding and accidents are really out of control in Connecticut. And I think accidents are one of the highest causes of death for young people. Unfortunately, the most vulnerable to injury are motorcyclists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. What we need is a statewide Safe Streets initiative that would redesign our roads so that they serve not only automobiles, but bicycles and pedestrians. We've seen this in some towns and cities. I've seen it in New Haven or in Stamford when I used to live there. Part of this can be done with signage, just to raise education, make people aware of other users on the road. It also involves putting in bicycle lanes or more sidewalks so that people can be safe and it separates the lines of traffic. It also means traffic calming. Installing roundabouts has been shown to be safer than a four-way intersection. Speed humps will force drivers to slow down. And street road narrowing helps also. At an intersection, you can have the sidewalks extend farther out into the street. And as you approach the intersection driving, the road narrows. So you have to slow down as you approach an intersection. These simple design features would do a lot to reduce the traffic accidents and the speeding on a lot of our roads.
Brandi Mandato.
Thank you. I was thinking about this a lot yesterday. So while I was doing research on this question, I got a phone call from my sister letting me know that she had been in a head-on collision on a small road where she saw the person coming at her and they were looking down. And so yesterday we spent last night waiting for results and to make sure that my sister was okay. And this morning we saw the wreckage that is her car. All of the airbags deployed. They needed to use the jaws of life. And my sister is okay. And it's because some of the technology that we're using in cars today. And so this is such a complicated question, but there are good answers. There are countries that do this really well. And so in my research, what I learned was key dynamics here that reduce injuries related to vehicles include regular safety audits. So identifying hotspots for accidents and unsafe mechanisms that exist on the highways. Engineering improvements. So thinking about, I think David mentioned it, whether we create 2 lanes on a highway where wrong way accidents occur more often, or we add speed bumps, and then also infrastructure for pedestrians and for bike riders, who again are often incredibly at risk in this space. Education and advocacy campaigns to ensure people know what the repercussions are for speeding, for driving illegally, and then technology where it's been proven to make sense. So thinking about lane drifting technology, that wrong way technology. So it has to really be a comprehensive, multi-pronged approach to begin to reduce the issues we're seeing here.
Thank you. Paul Cicarella.
Thank you. So we did pass legislation that would implement that technology. So if someone is going to be going the wrong way, it will alert the driver, hopefully that they're able to recognize they're going the wrong way. And it will also let the officers in the area know that this is happening, and hopefully they could deter terrible accidents, just like the one we heard up here. And I'm happy your sister is okay. That's very scary. But they're going to let the officer know. But if there's not an officer in the area, that's a problem. On public safety, Representative Fishby and I hear constantly what the challenge is, and it's recruitment and retention. We're down over 1,000 officers across the state. So if they're not on the roads to deter individuals from speeding, because anybody sees an officer, even if you're going the speed limit, you slow down a little bit, right? Having them out there is going to be very important. But making sure they're able to enforce the laws that are on the books. We don't need any more laws. There are plenty of laws that are on the books that can literally be implemented if we had the officers. Certain tools we're taking away from our law enforcement officers. The ability to chase when they feel it is appropriate is gone. And the criminals know that. Talking to our local chief police, they had to create another signal, which is a sign that they'll call on the radio because individuals are taking off. Not only when they're running out of a BJ's with a TV and they're stealing something, but even for a simple traffic violation, they're taking off. They're not stopping because they know they cannot be pursued. So we need to allow the officers to do the job to keep us safe. And we have to do that with common sense. Not all the time is the right choice to chase, because people can be put in danger. If it's the end of a school day, the officer should know, okay, let's not chase. But if the criminal knows every single time they run, the officer cannot chase them, they're going to continue to do that if there isn't any consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, David Bedell, do you have further comment?
Yeah, there are way too many cars on the roads. We need to take cars off the highway because Connecticut is not North Dakota. We don't have miles of roads through open fields. It's a very congested area. We need to implement more public transportation options so that people don't have to drive to work or wherever on the highway. I was very happy when the CT Rail program went in with somewhat increased schedule, but it's not always convenient. It still sometimes requires an hour wait. On the weekends, maybe 2 hours. We need more convenient and frequent train service. We need better bus service with frequent and predictable bus stops. People will take public transportation if it is frequent and convenient to them with stops in the appropriate places. If people had these options, then they wouldn't have to drive their car everywhere on the highway.
Brandi, do you have further comment?
Investing in a public transportation infrastructure is absolutely a way to address this issue. When I talk to law enforcement, when I talk to leaders nationally at departments of corrections, when we talk about the staffing issue, what we're talking about is job quality. What we're talking about is the fact that we have gotten rid of pensions in so many places. What we're talking about are the conditions in which so many of these folks have to work. Corrections officers have some of the lowest life expectancy of any occupation in the country. So your average corrections officer lives to about 59 years old. We have to improve the quality of the work, and we have to do that through partnership.
Paul Cicarella?
Thank you. One of the things I didn't get a chance to touch on, and I believe Representative Fishbein touched on this, we see the legalization of marijuana, and we see the increase in the amount of accidents that are happening, and you have to think, is that something that's connected? One of the things that kind of blow my mind is right now, an officer cannot solely pull someone over for only smoking marijuana. If I'm driving and I'm drinking a beer, an officer pulls up beside me, they could pull me over. If I'm smoking marijuana, they pull up beside me. By law, they cannot only pull me over for that reason. And that just has a lack of common sense. In the House and in the Senate, we've ran several amendments to address that, and it was voted down party line. So right now, an individual cannot get pulled over for solely smoking marijuana, and we attempted to fix that numerous times. It's just common sense. We need to apply that and make sure legislators are listening to the experts, the law enforcement personnel, and the constituents, and addressing it accordingly.
Thank you. Excuse me. Next question is a two-part question regarding health care. There is a crisis in healthcare due to lack of qualified, dependable employees. This applies to hospitals, rehab centers, assisted living facilities, and home health care agencies. More people want to stay in their homes, requiring more staffing with home health care agencies, for which there are safety questions for both the staff and the client. What do you think state government can do to improve the employment outlook? And second, what do you consider to be the most important issue in Connecticut healthcare other than the employment issue? Craig Fishbein, we'll start with you.
Thank you. So, as I touched on before, being able, somebody who's licensed to be a nurse, let's say, in another state, that desires to come to our state to work as a nurse, their license should be portable to our state. We need to increase the amount of people that are eligible to do these jobs. You know, a portion of the question deals with dependable. And I have to say, I haven't seen a lack of dependency in this area of employment. You know, the people that I've talked to that are in the healthcare industry are so dependable, it's amazing. I mean, angels during the pandemic working longer shifts and, helping so many people. I think they just rose to the top. But, licensing is one area. We also have to make a climate that people want to come to Connecticut. We've talked a lot about crime tonight. Talked a lot about dying on the highways. If I was living in another state that, if we have 33% increase in motor vehicle theft here in Connecticut, and you're looking at whether or not you want to come to Connecticut, I would be considering that as a factor. So, it all works in together. The second part of the question, the most important aspect of healthcare, in my opinion, is actually the reimbursement rate. Mental health is an issue, right? Today, cover the Hartford Courant. I do read the Hartford Courant. Above the fold, suicides by juveniles in our state, very, very high. You not only have children dying on the roadways, but you have them committing suicide, right? Mental health and the reimbursement for mental health services is something that has to be looked at. There has to be more people in that area so that those services, I work with a lot of kids and families that have kids, and it's going to come back to me, but I'm out of time for right now.
Okay, Rebecca Highland.
Thank you. So when we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about asking the experts, the people who know what's going on in the field and what help they need. So I called the people at SEIU 1199 who represent healthcare employees in Connecticut who have endorsed me, and I asked them, what is it that you see and what is it that you need? Because when you're a representative, you have to be willing to know what you know and know what you don't know. And there is no room for ego and arrogance in representing people and what they need to make their lives better. And a lot of what they need is they need reform in terms of the financing of their positions and their jobs, especially the industries that are dependent on Medicaid funding. We've got people who are working 110 hours a week in 2 full-time jobs because they can't support their lives based on how they're being paid at their jobs because the funding for these jobs is just disappearing. Additionally, when it comes to what I think the most important thing in terms of healthcare in the state, affordability and accessibility. And that goes for both what we consider traditional physical care as well as mental health. I am a mental health now endorsed candidate, and that means that I have fully committed and they have given me recognition for legislating in pursuit of mental health needs. We need to do something about prescription drug costs. We need to do something about regulating the insurance companies so that they're not the ones making the decisions about what medication and treatment you get when your doctor has said you need something. And we need to look at a public option, which would also help small businesses, by the way, when it comes to healthcare. There are so many things that we can do from a legislative perspective to help you, the people, in an area that is life and death. And we have to do that.
Craig, do you have further comment?
Yeah, I just want to wrap up with what I was talking about. Recently I had a case with 2 young children. One's 4 and one's 7. And there was an allegation that dad had done something inappropriate sexually with the children. And, DCF gets involved, the police get involved, and, my concern is always the kids. So I said to my client, you need to get them into therapy. And she had already realized that anyway, but we had the discussion. And it took her like a month to get these 2 young children into therapy. They're dwelling on what happened. It's very difficult. And, we signed on to, was it Bill 5001 in 2021 that expanded mental health services, having the telehealth for mental health services. That's something we didn't have pre-pandemic, right? That expanded the ability here, and I've seen people improved, and I'm out of time again, but thank you.
Rebecca?
Healthcare is people. And I'm sorry, you cannot say you're committed to healthcare and mental health care if you're not willing to fully fund the programs that provide the people the care that they so desperately need. I am a type 1 diabetic, and I have been since I was 9 years old. I have rationed my insulin. I have struggled with insurance companies. I have paid $792 out of pocket for 9 bottles of insulin. That is $88 per bottle of insulin when insulin costs $2 to $4 per bottle to make. Representative Fishbein voted no to capping the cost of insulin. Thank you.
Excuse me, the Jerry Farrell.
You know, certainly there are plenty of Wallingford people as they age who would like to stay at home, that they want to live the rest of their life in their own home where they've been comfortable. Now, this issue hits very close to home for me. My mom is such a person. She suffers from Parkinson's and has round-the-clock care. My sisters work in Wallingford as elder care lawyers. They've advised hundreds of Wallingford families how to navigate Title 19. When I was the Commissioner of Consumer Protection, I passed the Homemaker Companion Bill that called for, background checks on those who want to do home health care. Right now, the problem with this is that the rate of reimbursement does not work, that under Title 19 will pay $8,500, whereas private pay, a worker can get approximately $17,000. There is no question that we need to assist our Wallingford senior citizens by upping the rate of reimbursement. If it's half, what you can get, no one's going to take those kind of jobs. So it's something that I think is really incumbent on us to change very quickly. There's so many people who are in this very difficult situation.
Mary Mashinsky.
We had a staff shortage as a result of the pandemic. About half the staff, nursing, doctors, the clinical people were burned out from working so many hours during the pandemic. And they also felt that they had mental health issues themselves. They weren't getting support. They were getting harassed by some of their patients. They weren't getting support. One person actually was killed when she made a home visit, and we had to address that legislatively. But unlike pilots who are told you can't fly that many hours, you have to take a rest, the medical staff don't have that protection. They just have to keep working until they burn out. And this is really chasing people out of the healthcare business. And they have told me that themselves personally, that they don't want to stay in that field anymore. So we have to give them protection from overwork and harassment. They have to be able to complete their workload in the time. If they're being harassed by patients, we have to help them. We are going to need to train new people, and at Southern Connecticut State University, there is a mock hospital setting where they're training new young people to take on the position of some of these folks who retired because of burnout. We do pay family members to do home care for their own relatives. That's a very popular program, and that's new this year. Do you want to do the second question now?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second question, I agree with some of the other people up here that mental health coverage is a problem. I worked on mental health parity and it passed, and we do have mental health coverage, but we don't have enough psychiatrists. You have to wait weeks for a psychiatrist. There just aren't enough qualified people. So we are using telehealth, and that is helping. It's reducing the waiting time.
Thanks, Mary. Jerry, do you have further comment?
The second part of the question that you asked, well, what's the most important thing? And I would agree that it's the affordability of healthcare. The piece that I pick up on there is that while so many pieces of healthcare are federal, there are some pieces that are very state legislature specific. It's really an absolute scandal that our hospitals in the state have been allowed to transform themselves from public charities to multi-million-dollar corporations. We have hedge funds that are out, shopping our Connecticut hospitals. That shouldn't be. That's a piece of the legislature in authorizing them as corporations that they should go back to being public charities, not for-profit institutions.
Mary Vischinski.
Not sure that's legal to block someone from purchasing a hospital, but could be researched.
Can I respond to that one?
No. In your later comments, you can.
Sure.
All right, the Brandi Mandato, would you please answer the question?
Thank you. This question is personal to all of us because we all access the healthcare system. I have 3 sisters that are nurses. I've been endorsed by dozens at this point of labor organizations, industry coalitions, and advocates, several of them from the healthcare space because of the work that I've done over the last 20 years to ensure that our healthcare systems are stronger. So when I was at the City University of New York, I worked closely with City University of New York is the largest urban university in the country. Serves 500,000 students a year, many of them from Connecticut. And what we did was a full partnership with the state and employers and industry coalitions to ensure that we were training people for existing jobs. So we evaluated all of the training programs across the state and in the city to ensure that, 1, we weren't producing graduates that didn't have a job to move into, and 2, that we were listening directly to employers to ensure the curriculum that we were designing was going to result directly in a job. I'm really proud of programs like the one we have in North Haven, where high school students can achieve college-level credit and participate in college-level courses in the healthcare space. We need to build more pipelines like that into the sector. And we need to ensure it's a good job to have. For many years, for decades, going into healthcare meant financial stability and meant the ability to support your family, and we have shifted away from that. And to the second part of the question, demand, I think, is the second biggest issue facing our sector. We are already in the healthcare space a crumbling infrastructure, unable to meet the needs of so many people, and I hear that from providers. I hear that from providers about the burden of some of the work that they're required to do that takes them away from working directly with patients. So how do we understand and leverage technology to address that?
Okay, thank you. Paul Cicarella.
Thank you. Over the last 4 years, this is something that we've heard a lot about, and it's very important to everyone. We all need access to healthcare, and we need affordable healthcare. Over the last 4 years, some of the legislation that we proposed and worked together, bipartisan, to get across the board, which was 5001, which I co-sponsored. Representative Fishbein spoke about some of that legislation that really helps with the issues that we're seeing. Also, we talked about the safety for the home health care providers that have to go into the homes, and that was SB1. Also bipartisan, we came together and made legislation that would address the problem. When we talk about the problem, it's not only accessibility, but it's affordability. You know, the reimbursement rates have not changed in over 20 years. I think it's 58% on the dollar that the providers are getting back. Other states have better reimbursement rates. We also see other challenges that our medical providers have. Our insurance, our malpractice insurance, is more expensive than all of the states that are surrounding us. So we see a lot of the talent we have from some of the great schools here in Connecticut are leaving the state to go work in other areas because they get more money. And we need to address that. We put forward ways to make it more affordable. We want to be able to have reinsurance for the insurance companies to mitigate risk. That was a proposal. We also want to have association healthcare plans. That allows groups of businesses to come together and have buying power, so when they're purchasing insurance to provide to their employees, they could do that with a better cost. And these are ideas that we've put forward numerous years in a row, but we need to make sure we work together to get it done. Not one piece of legislation came out of insurance this year. The chairs could not come together and agree on anything, and nothing happened. That's a problem.
David Bedell.
You know, on the staffing question, in addition to affordable health care, we need affordable medical education at our medical schools and other health-related career training programs. We need to draw more people into these careers because there's such a great demand for them. In the short term, I mean, while we train up more staff for these careers, I think we may need to rely on foreign workers. I've had excellent doctors and dentists who came from India, Pakistan, Russia, Poland. I think we should ask the federal government to issue more work visas so that skilled nurses and doctors can come here either for the short term or as a path toward immigration. There is enormous talent out there in other countries which could be brought in here to fill the gaps in the short term. On the other question of other issues, all right, we've talked about mental health, which is enormous, but also I get my medical insurance through the Affordable Care Act, which is a step in the right direction. But I think most people are happy with the Medicare program that covers retired people. But why does it only cover retired people? What we really need is Medicare for all. That could be phased in gradually. It could be phased in for children or extended, a year at a time or 5 years at a time from 65 down. If we can't achieve that on the federal level, we could enact such a single-payer program at the state level. I know as it would be a model for the rest of the country. I mean, look at Obamacare was modeled on Romney Care in Massachusetts. It was an excellent program that was extended to the country. In Canada, their national health plan was started in Saskatchewan, one province.
Thank you. Brandi, do you have further comment?
Sure. I've worked on refresher programs for immigrant nurses who come from other countries and have years of experience providing exceptional levels of service. We could implement a similar program for licensure expansion from other states so that those barriers for healthcare professionals don't exist, or we have a way to remediate them. Mental health care is core to my campaign, and we will talk a little bit more about that later. And so I have to acknowledge that the legislation that would have allowed for continued mental health services in our schools was voted against by candidate Cicarella.
Paul Cicarella, do you have further comment?
Yes, thank you. So we talk about reciprocity where other individuals' licenses from other states could be utilized here in Connecticut. And those are ideas that were proposed by my colleagues. Unfortunately, they were not taken up. We also talked about some other licenses where we have issues. We talked about the electricians that need these apprentices. And we've tried to present ideas that would address the ratio. And these are those burdens that we speak of. These are things that we can do. We've put them forward, and we need, just like we worked on 5001 or SB1, we need to come together and put forward legislation that will actually benefit the constituents that we represent. So I think it's imperative that we listen to the stakeholders and the individuals affected by legislation and implement those policies. Thank you.
David Bedell.
Yeah, I'd like to say more about state-based affordable health care. Other states have been looking into this. States like Vermont, New York, Ohio, to establish single payer on a state basis. And only recently, Senator Markey from Massachusetts introduced a state-based single payer bill, which would allow states to implement such a program as an alternative to the Affordable Care Act. Now, short of getting that passed as a state single payer plan, somebody mentioned the state public option so that people could buy into that at a more affordable rate. And again, we have the model of the state employee insurance, which I think there's been discussion about extending that, letting municipalities buy into that, and it could be made available to let more people buy into this larger, more affordable plan.
Thank you. The last question of the evening. What are the two most important issues you plan to address if you were elected, and how will you bring the legislation to vote to address them? Rebecca, would you please start?
So the two most important issues facing you, the people, right now are economic security and public education. Economic security is the perfect example. We're taking a so-called hands-off approach and just letting the system do what it does, less government interference in your day-to-day life. Perfect example of where that does not work. You, the working people of Connecticut, people on limited incomes, need help, and you're begging your state legislatures to help you. Working people, people on limited incomes are facing price increases through the roof, the inability to pay for your day-to-day goods. So we need tax reforms. Middle-class families are carrying the burden of taxes in this state, and we need to make sure that not only the wealthy, but also big corporations are paying their fair share. A fair share. Reduce strain on families by providing breakfast and lunch to kids in school. We may not be able to stop price gouging of groceries at the state level, but we can certainly help put money back in families' pockets. We can improve workforce by aiding in training programs and childcare so that people who want to work can go to work. And like we've talked about, healthcare is a huge financial strain. We also need to focus on public education. We need to fully fund teachers, school staff, the people who keep our schools running, and we need to stop cutting school budgets. There are 169 municipalities in this state, and there are ways that the state legislatures can make sure that there's not such a drastic difference in the way schools are funded across the state. We also need to keep focusing on reducing gun violence in schools. I'm tired of sending my 5-year-old child to school thinking, is he going to be shot when he's trying to learn?
Thank you. Craig Fishbein.
So an issue that doesn't necessarily affect Wallingford, but it does affect the district, is the public benefits charge that is falling on people's electric bills. The district covers all of Middlefield. And, in answer to the question, I, as a legislator, represent Middlefield as well. I'll tell you that a lot of the blame for that charge goes back to a bill that was passed in 2017. It was 1501. It was a Senate bill. And it was actually pushed by the Republicans. And I was a brand new legislator. I had just gotten sworn in. And I was one of 4 that stood up and said, this is wrong. I voted against my party. And I explained that if this became law, that it would create a monopoly. And that electric rates would increase, and it was unnecessary. And here we are, half a decade later, and I was right. You read any article today, and they're going back to that bill. So I intend to address it in the next term in the legislature. Another area, and I've already started to talk to Representative Lanahan about this, is we need to do something with DCF. We have way too many children that are dying in DCF care. There needs to be an overhaul of their system when they have the ability to go into a house, when they are required to go into a house. I know I'm going to run out of time soon, but I'll tell you a little story about a case I have going on right now, where they're in the house way too much, and it's unnecessary. And we need to look at that, because every child that dies in the state's care, when the state takes a child out of a parent's hands, they have a responsibility, and they have a responsibility to make sure that child doesn't die.
Thank you. Rebecca, further comment?
First and foremost, let's remember that a stable economy reduces crime. So if we're really committed to reducing crime, as we say we are, then we have to be committed to the steps that provide for a stable economy that actually reduces crime. I also challenge Representative Fishbein how you can say with a straight face that you've never voted to increase taxes when you voted no on the biggest tax cut that the middle class in Connecticut has seen in 30 years. So voting no to tax cuts is voting no to putting more money in your pockets that you desperately need. And lastly, I will say that I am honored that I have received the Connecticut Education Association Honor Roll designation, which is something that is rarely given to a non-sitting legislator. And I look forward to representing you. Thank you.
Craig Fishbein.
You know, I understand, never been in office before, you can only go negative. I choose not to do that. We talk about positive things. I didn't vote no against the biggest tax increase in the history. I doubt that candidate Highland ever read that budget. That is hyperbole to say that that is the case. That budget raised taxes upon certain individuals. It raised fees. It raised licensing fees. I can't support that, and I didn't support that. So thank you.
Okay. Mary Mashinsky.
The two issues I've already been working on and I will continue to work on next session are housing and energy costs. Housing, we're about 90,000 units of housing short. I have some constituents who live in their cars. I have some elderly constituents who live in their cars. There's a 4-year waiting list at the Housing Authority. It is shut off. You can't even get your name on the waiting list anymore. So we have to increase the supply. I'm active on a coalition of housing advocates in our South Central Connecticut region. We're working in Wallingford to increase housing here. I worked on a bill to increase housing in the transit districts, like around the train station and the downtown. That bill did not pass, but we would have gotten more money in Wallingford for additional housing, and I will push it next year. It died in the Senate. We are trying to get elderly housing near the senior center in Wallingford so that all the senior services would all be in one area, and additional apartments in town that are more affordable. And was that 1 minute list? Okay. The other issue is energy. I've spent a lot of effort this year on bringing heat pumps to Connecticut. They are used heavily in Maine. They are 200 to 300% more efficient. When they're installed, people's energy bills go down in most cases. And if we follow their model, we will reduce the cost of fuel oil and natural gas for many of our constituents. I'm working on the priority list with DEEP, and in my view of the priority list would be nursing homes, elderly housing, and low-income families as the priority for who gets the first ones. We could also help small businesses with these, but there's 25 million I put in the budget for this, and then we got 100 million from the federal government to add to the heat pump funding.
Thank you. Jerry Farrell.
You know, having served on the town council for 16 years, I'm well aware of the fact that people don't want to pay any more local property tax. Well, there's a long list of things, unfortunately, in Wallingford that need doing. Our schools need renovating. We have to do something with the community pool site. We have elderly housing. We have roads and bridges that are falling in disrepair. We need a bigger slice of state aid to come to Wallingford. You know, I think it's unfortunate that in 44 years and time as Deputy Speaker of the House, that the bacon hasn't been brought back to Wallingford. And that is exactly what I would do. I would work with a laser focus to bring back money to Wallingford, because we cannot afford all of these things through local taxation. You know, the other thing that's very important, and you know, I would disagree with Craig over this, is our Wallingford Electric Division is extremely important. I hope that no legislation gets brought up in the state legislature, because it would only damage the electric division. We want to stay out of their sites. The electric division is a creation of state statute. It can be changed. It can be damaged. Those great rates and the great service that we have, you know, may not be there in the future if the legislature puts their hands on it. So 2 key things that I would accomplish as your state legislator.
Mary, do you have further comment?
Just a comment that I have delivered for Wallingford $70 million in projects over the time I've been in office.
Okay. Jerry, you have further comment?
Well, I guess over 44 years, that's a good rate. You know, I've applied for grants. I assisted Holy Trinity Church recently in applying for a state grant to add security cameras and grab bars and things like that. We secured it. I sent it to every state representative related to Wallingford. The only one I heard from was Paul Cicarella, who assisted us in getting that grant. So, you know, I'd hope in the future that we could be encompassing of everybody, that whoever needs the money and is eligible for some of these state grants can get it.
Paul Cicarella.
Thank you. And we touched on some of the things that I feel are important to my constituents. And that's what I do. I listen to the constituents and advocate for what they're saying. And public safety was one, and we touched on a bit. And there's a lot more work to be done. I'm going to work with the stakeholders on both sides of the situation, our community leaders, our law enforcement, and find solutions to give options to our juveniles that are better than what they're doing now, while still keeping in mind the individuals that are affected by that crime every day. In so many ways, increasing of insurance or other costs of the property damage. The cost of living is something I hear constantly from everyone, but especially our seniors. People are retiring, they're on a fixed income, and they can't control how much money they're gonna bring in when they're retired. And the cost of living here in Connecticut is just way too expensive. Whether it's the taxes, whether it's the cost of goods that are being purchased, or if it's our utilities. We've talked about ways to address our utility costs. We've put forward legislation to address that. And when we get back into session, we need to implement things like a cap on our power purchase agreements. We also need to find a way to redefine what is considered clean energy. You know, if the wind deal came into place, thank God the governor did heed our warnings. That would have been 3 times more than we're spending right now for our nuclear, 3 times. So we need to make sure we're paying attention to those policies. And education is so important, and I will continue to advocate, as I've been, for our students to have the resources they need to become ready for the next step in life. We champion legislation that would make it mandatory for schools to offer financial literacy, and that's the core foundation allowing students to be able to make decisions about the next steps in life. And we need to continue that work.
David Bedell.
Yeah, so 2 issues. Number 1 is public health, we've already talked about. But number 2, I have to talk about the climate crisis. Last month, we saw record-breaking floods that were deadly and destructive in the Housatonic Valley. The recent hurricanes, terrible hurricanes in Florida. And Connecticut is not immune from these hurricanes and superstorms. I remember Hurricane Sandy a dozen years ago, and there will be more storms and unusual weather in Connecticut. This is related to public health, it's related to public safety, and it's related to the economy. As the climate is changing, we are subject to a lot of dangerous things coming. So we need to ramp up our efforts to get clean energy, to get away from fossil fuels, convert to electricity, which can be sourced from renewables, especially in a place like Wallingford, because we have this lower electric rates. We should encourage residences and businesses to convert from oil and natural gas to electricity, whether it's through heat pumps or electric cars or other electric replacements for the fossil fuels. We have a solar farm on the old Wallingford landfill, and I've seen many other towns doing this with unused landfills. It's a good use for the space. But we also have resources of heat pumps and geothermal energy, retrofitting to make our buildings more efficient. There are many ways that we can reduce our energy imprint, our impact. With the changing climate, as things get warmer here, there's a threat to public health. We see more ticks and other insects bringing new diseases to Connecticut, to New England. We see changes in agriculture and in the forests. This is serious business, and we have to ramp up our efforts.
Thank you. Brandi Mandato.
Thank you. My first priority will be affordability. 4 generations of my family live in this district. I am an active member of my community. I was a PTA mom last year. This time I took a break for obvious reasons. But I am in regular conversation with my neighbors and friends, and affordability is the biggest hurdle facing us right now. Last year, we saw 2 towns in the district, their budgets fail, Wallingford and North Haven. We saw, for the second time in a row, incredible cuts to Wallingford's teaching staff. We saw meetings go late in the night in North Haven to try and figure out how we made decisions between equitably funding our students or do we get an additional jaws of life. We are making impossible choices at the municipal level because we are not getting the resources we need from the state level. And so I will absolutely be a champion for that. We will no longer be writing legislation that puts the full breadth of a corporate bailout onto working people and working families. Dominion, the parent company, they made a profit of $2 billion last year, and for some reason, Millstone's bailout is in our bill. No more unfunded mandates from the state, particularly around education. And just to tie those two together, when we're thinking about bearing the weight of a bailout like that on an individual ratepayer, our school system is also bearing that weight. We are overspending already because of this. We have kicked the can down a road that ends in a cliff when it comes to public education, and we have to do better. And I'll use the second part to talk about mental health because it's too important to cram in.
Okay. Paul Cicarella, do you have further comment?
Yes, thank you. And I'm sure some of my colleagues that are currently serving will recognize the work we've done to bring back as much money as we could to our district. I do agree with the unfunded mandates is a huge problem. And we've seen numerous unfunded mandates, which I actively spoke against. We saw the right to read, where some of our schools here in our district are doing a phenomenal job. Our teachers are doing great. And there was an unfunded mandate for the right to read. And it simply didn't make sense. If there's not a problem, there's no need for a solution. And that was a huge unfunded mandate that makes the municipalities have to make tough decisions about where they're going to spend the money because of this mandate. So I couldn't agree more. And I continue to advocate for our municipalities to make sure they have the resources they need. And I will continue to do that. Thank you.
David Bedell.
Yeah, I'd like to say further that the Wallingford Electric Division is one of the best things we've got going for us in Wallingford and in the district. I know it serves parts of North Branford as well as Wallingford and possibly parts of North Haven as well. And I certainly hope that the state does not interfere with the municipal utility, which was set up 100 years ago. In fact, the state should incentivize the municipal utilities to serve larger areas or perhaps to allow other towns to establish municipal utilities. Currently, they only serve a handful of towns across the state. And it's affordable and it's locally controlled through a commission that is answerable to the people, the local voters and residents. So I think this program needs to be expanded and see about sourcing its energy from renewable energy sources.
Brandi, do you have further comment?
I do, thank you. Last legislative session, a bill was put forward to address the fact that 4 out of 5 towns in District 34 were underfunded in terms of our education. Candidate Cicarella voted against that to increase that by 10% across 4 out of the 5 towns. Additionally, North Haven is almost at the bottom in terms of our district resource group, in terms of resources brought home from the state. We are failing the district. 2 of our budgets failed. Our infrastructure is falling apart. We have to bring more state funds home.
Thank you. That concludes the question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Ms. Highland, will you please begin?
Representing people requires talking to them, and it requires listening to people that disagree with you and being willing to hear what they have to say. Effective government depends on representatives who are willing and capable of working with both sides to get what's done for the people, what's right for the people, actually brought home to the people. And I'm going to give you a couple of perfect examples. First, there was a firefighter bill to fund a cancer relief fund for the firefighters. And it was sponsored by Democrats and Republicans alike. 14 Republicans sponsored it. 43 Republicans voted yes for it. There was one no vote for the firefighter cancer relief fund. And that one no vote is Representative Fishbein. There's a very big difference between going negative and holding public officials accountable for the decisions that they make on our behalves. And of course I read the budget bill. But I'll tell you something else. Representative Fishbein also voted no to banning an abusive therapeutic technique called conversion therapy that's used on children. And his explanation for why he voted no to that was because he didn't know what it was at the time he voted. I've talked to thousands of you at your doors, and we all agree on three things. We want health, happiness, and the opportunities to succeed for ourselves and our loved ones. We differ on how we're going to get there, and it's time to put partisan politics aside. It's time that we put our heads together, that we all have a seat at the table regardless of party, and we get things done for the people of the 90th District. I look forward to representing you in Hartford. Thank you.
Craig Fishbein.
So looking at the math, there's 151 people in the House of Representatives. Perhaps what is being addressed there is a committee bill that I believe was fixed after the committee vote and then was supported on the floor of the House of Representatives. The conversion therapy bill, testimony was that it's not practiced in the state of Connecticut. They couldn't tell us what it was. I reiterated that. You know, when I was a young child, we lived over on Brownstone Road. I remember one day at election season, Mary Fritz came and knocked on our door. My family was so happy. You know, their elected representative had come to our door to talk about re-election. And, you know, that has carried on with me for so many years. And I sit here, you know, Mary had the 90th before me, and I carry on that tradition. You know, I've personally done thousands of doors during this campaign, and I usually do every campaign because I run every year. I've walked over 250 miles during this campaign. I don't send out surrogates. You don't see somebody knocking on the door on behalf of me. I'm there. And people appreciate that. And I appreciate their appreciation. And I look forward to another term in Hartford. You know, Hartford is all about relationships. I think anybody who's been up there will tell you it is all about relationships. We work out so much stuff in the hallways as opposed to in the House chamber, the Senate chamber. Cross the aisles, working together. I can't tell you how many times we have done that, those of us that are up there, working together. No matter what you hear, no matter what you read about partisan politics, we work together a lot. And I appreciate working together into the next session, and thank you, and God bless America.
Mary Mashinsky.
I'm very honored to be able to serve as a state representative for the 85th District in my hometown of Wallingford. I have a very steady record of delivery for Wallingford. I have brought in $70 million worth of funds for the town, including the linear trail, which I started and continue to fund, the Spanish community of Wallingford, Gaylord Hospital, Lyman Hall's track, the YMCA, which is now teaching kids how to swim because we don't have a pool, Wallingford Daycare, and on and on. Wallingford, the Yeoburg Boys and Girls Club, all these people that come to see me, I help them with get their projects funded. I am better able to do this kind of work than my opponent, who was a commissioner who had a big staff, but he could tell them, go do this, go do that. A legislator has a 1/4 staff person, and they have to do the work themselves. They have to hustle and find the cash for their town. I even got funds for the schools to replace their furnaces, but the town did not apply. Other towns did, Wallingford did not, sadly, but I did try. I have responded to my constituents. I also door knock, and I've responded to them. They're looking for cost reduction with tax cuts. The average family in Wallingford got a $580 tax cut. They got a child tax credit. They got a $300 property tax credit. And we gave a full exemption for disabled veterans. My next tasks will be 2 other costly things: reduce housing costs, I've already explained that, and lowering energy costs by using technology that other states are using that we are not using yet here in Connecticut. But we could, and we could save money and save the climate as well.
Mary, that's time.
And just to end up, I am endorsed by the Independent Party as a problem solver that they approve of. And I hope I can earn your vote. Thank you.
Jerry Farrell.
I want to tell you, I actually admire Mary Mashinsky very much, that over the years we've worked together on a number of things that, you know, I applaud you and want to say thank you for the 44 years of service. I remember somewhat fondly when the linear trail got going, you and I were sitting with Bill Dickinson, and you know, he's a tough sell. And he said, linear trails, we have them. They're called sidewalks. But you and I were able to convince Bill Dickinson that the linear trail was a good thing to go forward. We did the same thing on the fish ladder. So we've worked together, and I, you know, in that spirit, you know, I would suggest to the public that no one person is indispensable. No one person can be the only person who does the job. I've had 56 years of living in the town, 16 years on the town council, 5 years as the Commissioner of Consumer Protection. I had hundreds of laws I had to enforce, so that's why I had a big staff. The legislature creates a lot of laws. So I have some unique perspectives that I bring to this, and I think that at the end of the day, I can serve Wallingford as admirably as you have these 44 years.
Brandi Mandato.
Thank you so much. My path to this table hasn't been typical. I grew up in a low-income family in New Haven and saw all the barriers that exist for people when we don't have access to high-quality education, economic mobility, real opportunity. And so I dedicated myself to service, and that's what I've done my entire career. I have been on the sort of the outskirts of politics because I recognize that policy is a change lever that we have to pull to ensure that our government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I also approach this work with a point of view that is be kind to people and be ruthless on systems. And the General Assembly is a system. And when we ask for the honor to represent our community as a part of that system, we must hold ourselves accountable. And so I intend to do that. And you don't have to believe me. You can look at my 20 years of work as a trusted partner to business, to training providers, to some of the largest education systems in the country. At the city, local, and federal level, I have been able to work with policymakers and leaders across the political spectrum to ensure our government serves us. And it would be an incredible honor to continue that service in Hartford for the people of District 34. Thank you so much.
Paul Cicarella.
Thank you. And I spent my whole life in this district, and I started my family here. I started a business here. And in that time, I've spoke to so many people, and I completely understand the challenges they face. I experienced them myself. You know, I'm honored to be a Republican senator. I take great pride in the fact that I was endorsed by the Independent Party. It shows that I am about the people and the policy, not party. And I couldn't agree more with the colleagues up here that says it's so important to be able to communicate and work across the aisle. And that's what I've done to put forward meaningful legislation and will continue to do. But one of the things that frustrates me when I'm sitting with one of my friends on the other side of the aisle and I'm agreeing with them, and it comes time to vote, and they don't vote the way that they were telling me to vote. That's a problem. And we need to pay attention to the votes that our that our elected officials make on behalf of the constituents. We need to listen to them. And that's what I want to continue to do, to support our education, make sure the teachers and students have the resources they need, make sure our seniors could stay here in Connecticut, the state that they worked and grew their family in, and make sure it's affordable. And I will continue to advocate for our first responders, make sure they have the tools, the resources they need to keep our streets safe and hold individuals accountable. I hope that I could count on your continued support to be your voice in Hartford. Thank you.
David Bedell.
In my closing statement, I'd like to point out that both my opponents come from North Haven. And I have nothing against North Haven. I grew up there. I graduated from North Haven High School. But I live in Wallingford now. So I'd like to ask you to vote for one of your neighbors to represent you in Hartford. Furthermore, as a Green Party candidate, I will be an independent voice in the legislature, and I will have to work with members of both majority parties. And I will not buy into any party divisions or be pressured by party leaders to vote along party lines. Now, some of you may not know much about the Green Party, so I'd like to use the rest of my time to say the Green Party is a national political party and, in fact, a global movement. It's a party of the environment and of peace and social justice. We have candidates running at all levels, from municipal up to president. And I encourage you to look at the Green Party candidate Jill Stein for president and Justin Paglino for Congress. They are both running on a platform of Medicare for all and on a peace platform calling for a ceasefire in the Middle East and to spend federal monies here in the United States to address needs here rather than shipping weapons overseas. However you may vote in this race, you have to keep in mind that Connecticut is not one of the 7 swing states. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that Connecticut will give its electoral votes to the Democratic candidate for president. So whether you vote for Trump or you vote for Harris, it's not going to change the outcome of the election. However, if you vote for Jill Stein and Justin Paglino, it will send a message that you want peace, a peaceful foreign policy, you want Medicare for all. Thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates. I will now read a statement from Liz Linehan. Thank you to Wallingford community women for holding this debate and to all the candidates for coming tonight. This year I'm running unopposed, and therefore it's technically no one for me to directly debate for the benefit of the viewers. Because of this and another family issue, I am not appearing on stage this evening, which will leave more time to hear from the other candidates and learn their positions to these very important topics facing our state. However, I do believe it is necessary for my constituents to know where I stand on these issues. Therefore, starting tomorrow, I will post my answers to the questions being asked tonight on my Facebook page. They will be posted on my open page at Liz-Linehan-Connecticut. And as always, constituents are welcome to contact me anytime for questions, concerns, or for further discussion of any topic. Best of luck to all the candidates, and I urge voters to consider early in-person voting to ensure their voices are heard. Otherwise, I will look forward to seeing everyone at the polls on November 5th. With warm regards, Representative Liz Linehan. Thank you. This concludes the 2024 Candidates Forum. On behalf of the Wallingford Community Women, I thank you for watching and remind you to please vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Always good seeing you, my friend. All right.